All right, and we are live, Nader. Okay, so this is the next community workshop, Intro to Lens, with our special guest, Nader Dabit. For those that don't know who this is, literally one of the co-founders of Developer DAO. But how I discovered Nader myself is when I started developing, I was looking for a solution of how to connect my front end to the blockchain. And for the life of me, I could not find one example of something that actually sent ETH in a transaction. Like I had 2,000 tutorials, right? Connect a function with this, but none of them actually had a passive value of ETH in it until I discovered one random video by this random dude making a marketplace of like, oh, this is how you do it. And then like 40 minutes into the video, I see that one snippet of value of like, oh, this is how you pass ETH into the transaction for a payable. And I became a fan for life. So that's how I discovered
Nice.
now. And this is where we're at now. So hopefully people out there watching, this workshop for Lens, maybe somebody has that same similar story of like, man, I got stuck. I didn't know how to start Lens or anything. So it is my pleasure to let Nader take the show and Lens workshop. I'm just going to shut up now. Go for Nader.
Hey, yeah, thanks for setting this all up and organizing it and inviting me and all that. So really happy to be here. So do you want me to just kind of jump right in, I guess?
Yep, go for it. It's your show now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so as he mentioned, I'm going to be talking about Lens, and it's going to be kind of separated into two parts. We're going to have a kind of just introductory presentation, like a slideshow that I'm going to walk through, and then we're going to just actually jump into some code. So we're going to start from a brand new blank application, a web app using Next.js, and we're going to build out an app. And we're going to accomplish both of those things in hopefully about 40 minutes. So, and then that will maybe, I don't know, do we have time for like a Q&A or anything like that?
Yeah, whatever your time availability is, we'll work with it. If we go over, under, I'm going to have people ask questions throughout there. I might stop you from time to time if someone gets stuck, but yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, feel free to drop a question and we'll definitely start getting to those at some point. Okay, cool. So my name is Nader. I was one of the co-founders of Developer DAO, like you mentioned. I've been a software developer, I guess, for like 11 years, and then in developer education for about 8 of those years. And I got into blockchain in 2021, the beginning of 2021, and I'm still here. So I've worked with a couple of companies, the Graph Protocol. I've worked with Celestia, and I now work with Aave and Lens Protocol. And what I'm doing right now, actually, I'm in Mexico City for 2 days. I am hacking here with some people on some AI stuff, and also I'm hacking on some ETH stuff for ETHCC, which is a conference that's coming up. You probably seen people talking about it in Paris. I'm flying out the day after tomorrow, so I flew into Mexico City this morning. So kind of a chaotic day for me, but I'm ready. I'm ready to go now. So I guess I'll go ahead and jump right in. So I'm going to start with this slideshow, and I guess I will share my screen now.
I'm not seeing. There we go. Just as
All
I
right,
speak.
there we go. Yeah. So this is kind of like a Lens Protocol 101. I'm calling it building full stack Web3 social apps or social applications. So my name is Nader. Like I mentioned, I kind of already did this intro. And what I'm going to be talking about is everything that you need to know as a developer or even as a user about Lens. If you want to follow along with any of the stuff that I'm about to do, if you want to see any of the links I'm about to show you, everything that you could possibly need to get started with Lens is right here. So scan this QR code. Let me make sure it still works because I created this like a few weeks ago. Should still work fine. Actually, no, this doesn't work. Okay, I'll have to fix that anyway. I'll link to these things later on. So sorry about that. But this link right here at the bottom still works. GitHub.com/Dabit3/Lens Protocol Workshop. We're going to be touching on this later. This is going to be the code that we're going to walk through, and I'll talk about some of these other links. So apologies for that. Should have double checked that. All right, so to kick things off, I just want to talk about what Lens is. And we basically, like as an elevator like overview of what it is, we call it just like the social layer for Web3. But in reality, for developers and to kind of understand it better from a technologist perspective, I guess you could say, is that Lens is basically a set of APIs, tools, and a protocol that allow developers to easily build social applications or integrate social features into existing applications. So when we think about social applications, they are on a completely different, I would say, scale than almost anything else that's out there. There is no category of applications that has more users than social applications. Almost everyone on the internet is using a social application of some sort. 4.9 billion people. So beyond this just being a use case that everyone already kind of understands, it's also really interesting from the perspective of people talking about onboarding users into Web3 or getting people acquainted with and familiar with like Web3 terminology and tooling and wallets and stuff like that. And when we say social applications, what is a social app? Well, there are a lot of different examples of social applications. I guess you could think of, obviously, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram as social applications, but it actually goes way beyond that because there's social features in almost all of the applications that we use today. A good example of this, if you're a developer, which is, you probably are if you're here, something like GitHub is a social application because when you sign up, you create a profile. In that profile, you store personal information. When you create a new GitHub repo, people can actually follow you and they can star your repos, and you are given a feed of content for other people that you're following to kind of see their activity and vice versa. So this type of thing is happening in so many of the apps today. And because it's so common, it makes a lot of sense to kind of just make building this type of functionality like super easy. In a similar vein, a lot of what's been happening in the traditional Web 2 world is also going this route in the sense of abstracting away complex infrastructure to enable app developers to more easily build the ideas that they want to build. Examples are something like Auth0 for authentication and authorization, Twilio for sending messages and things like that. You have the idea of serverless functions for execution environments that are short-lived that you don't have to maintain. Vercel has a really simple deployment platform that is in the same vein. And I think Lens is essentially like a serverless social layer. That's the way I would kind of look at it. And now that we've kind of introed what Lens is, let's talk about how Lens works. And this is more like aimed at developers. So at the very core of Lens is just a set of smart contracts that defines a lot of on-chain stuff that is happening. And it's deployed to Polygon. But in addition to Polygon, it's also been deployed in a new infrastructure that we released that uses Arweave and Bundler Network as a data availability layer. So anything on-chain that requires some type of tokenization, like an NFT or something, would go to Polygon, but all of the posts, comments, and stuff that doesn't need to be on a traditional blockchain is actually on Arweave, which serves the same purpose as a blockchain in the sense that it's permanent, it's immutable, and it is content addressable, I guess you could say. And beyond just the set of smart contracts and the infrastructure that you can kind of like interact with, just like you could any Web3 or any blockchain protocol, what really makes Lens, I think, special and easy for developers to actually build something useful is that we built a lot of layers on top of the smart contracts to make it really simple to build. So first of all, there is a really, really fast and high quality GraphQL API that gives you the querying capabilities that you might expect from like a database. So smart contracts are limited. You can't hit a smart contract with a complex SQL query. You can't say, give me the last 10 posts from users whose last name started with D, who live in Oregon, who's, I don't know, who have an ENS domain, for example. Like stuff like that's just impossible. So what ends up happening is if you wanted to build something like that on top of a set of smart contracts, you would end up building a really complex and sophisticated indexing layer that you would have to deal with and maintain and continue to update and stuff like that. But we basically built that for developers and offered a really nice API on top of it. So instead of dealing with the smart contracts, you can actually go to this API and ask for whatever information you want, meaning that you can easily build high quality views for the types of UX that you might expect from something like Twitter or Instagram. You want to get followers or followers of followers. You want to get posts with different recommendation algorithms. You want to get an individual post. All of that is really simple using the API. In addition to the API, we've also implemented gasless transactions and signless transactions, meaning that when you interact on Lens, you don't have to pay for the transaction and you don't have to sign for the transaction. Because these posts are non-financial, you can enable our dispatcher using a single signature, basically giving it authorization to post using an access token that you get when you sign in. And using this access token, you can do pretty much anything that is non-financial, which is good because you don't want to authorize pretty much anything to send financial interaction on your behalf. But when you're liking a post or you're retweeting a post or something like that, like it doesn't really make sense for you to sign the transaction over and over. So what you end up getting, combining this API, this dispatcher, and the gasless transaction, is now the possibility and the realization of high quality user experiences that are on par to Twitter, Instagram, etc. One of the things that we launched that is a lot different than anything that we've really seen before was this infrastructure layer that I mentioned that uses Arweave, and it's called Momoka. And in the past, our transactions were something like, I don't know, like a cent or give or take, a fraction of a cent plus or minus per transaction on Polygon. And this did not make sense at scale, right? Because when you think about something like Twitter, you're seeing 50,000 transactions per second at peak usage. And on Polygon, that would cost thousands of dollars per second, right? And when you start thinking about how traditional social applications work, the user doesn't pay for that, right? You don't go to Twitter and expect to pay to send a tweet. You don't go to Instagram and expect to pay to post a comment. So we want to continue making it free. And Momoka is the new infrastructure that will enable this, that does enable this. So the transaction cost at this point is actually 0.0003 cents per transaction. For the 300,000 transactions or more that we've now hit, and this is an older slide because we're now at like over 300,000 Momoka transactions, it's less than a single ETH1 layer transaction at peak gas times. So we're talking about up to 300,000 times cheaper than something like ETH-L1 at the peak gas usage, which is huge because this actually enables you to build, for the first time, in my opinion, the types of scale that we actually would expect in order to onboard a large number of users. Because in the past, there is no infrastructure that is Web3 that manages this type of load. So one of the things that we are highly focused on is around developer experience, and we still have a lot of stuff that we're doing to improve, but already we have some great stuff that is aimed at providing a superior DX. One, I already mentioned the Lens API. We've also released SDKs and frameworks for building mobile apps, integrations, and web applications. One of those is the Lens SDK, which we're going to be using in our workshop. This allows you to query the API with only a couple of lines of code. The API itself requires you to understand GraphQL to an extent. The SDK is just a set of React hooks, and you can get started with just a couple of lines of code. The React Native Lens UI Kit is an open source project that I launched a few months ago that allows you to build mobile apps with Lens really, really easily. It allows you to get started with also just a couple of lines of code. We also have Lens widgets and embeds, which allow you to integrate features like follow on Lens, sign in with Lens, and share to Lens, among other things, with just 2 lines of code. And this is huge because there are over 100,000 users at this second on Lens. And a lot of people are trying to get distribution of Web3 because Web3 is a small community. But if you can click a button and share something from another app to your social graph using Share to Lens, you're now putting your content in front of a whole new audience. And we make that easy with just like maybe 2 lines of code. We're starting to see a lot of demand for different recommendation algorithms and options for social applications. I think one of the biggest complaints that people have about TikTok and Twitter and Instagram is that you are fed a certain recommendation algorithm and you have no control over it. But With Web3, all this data is now publicly available for the first time ever. So people are building out different recommendation algorithms. So to make that easier, we're offering a set of over 50 BigQuery tables that are called the Lens BigQuery. And you can use this to query all of the data that's ever been stored on Lens. So we're seeing a lot of really great recommendation algorithms and data science projects coming out of this. There are already over 7 teams building out custom recommendation algorithms that Lens developers can use, or any developers can really use to query Lens data. And then finally, encrypted DMs are kind of huge deal. You saw Coinbase just launched integration with Lens using XMTP, using this feature yesterday. And it's essentially a way to simply set up DMs that integrate with every other Lens app. And you can also, believe it or not, this is not an SDK that we maintain. This is XMTP's SDK, but it's also just a few lines of code to kind of get started there. And it's really, really cool. Oh, okay, sorry, I should have actually gone by these one by one. I keep forgetting about that. Okay, let me go to this slot here because it's actually pretty good. The Lens SDK is kind of like an abstraction on top of the Lens API. So here we have the Lens API like sitting in the middle. The protocol is below that. And the API kind of indexes the data from the protocol, and the SDK abstracts away the API a little bit. Using the SDK, this is kind of what an interaction might look like. You would import a hook, 2 lines of code, you import it, and then you kind of invoke it by calling use whatever the hook is called. So this case is use explore profiles. React Native Lens UI kits, same idea, 2 lines of code to get you started. The widgets and embeds, same idea, 2 lines of code to get you started. This is kind of an example of what some of these widgets look like. You can render a profile, you can render buttons, you can render a feed of profiles, a feed of publications, all kinds of stuff. Lens BigQuery I talked about, and the encrypted DMs I talked about. So like with all this in mind, there's a couple of things that I would say are kind of top of mind for us. One of them is extensibility. This isn't a characteristic only of Lens, it's a characteristic of blockchains and public open protocols and Web3 in general. And in the case of Lens, how this is something that we would like to highlight is this around this idea of custom modules. So custom modules are basically smart contracts that you can write to implement functionality into Lens. You could think of this as if you were able to submit a pull request to Instagram or Twitter, getting the functionality that you wanted for your app into the actual system in order for yourself and everyone else to use. So custom modules allow you to kind of change and do different things around actions in the network. So an action would be collecting a post, following a user, it would be unfollowing a user, it would be different stuff like that. Or I would say collecting a post, following a user, or sharing a post maybe would be a better example. So if you wanted to, you can kind of expand in one of the applications, this is Lenster, how you allow someone to collect your content for an individual post. You open up the settings for that post. You can say this post can be collected, meaning it'll go on chain. You can charge a certain amount for that post for collecting it. You can set a limited number. You can decide who can collect. You can say only my followers collect, or you can go even beyond this and say only people who follow X number of people or X person or whatever you would like. So you have a lot of control over this. And we also have this split revenue module, which is pretty cool, which is essentially kind of extension of the base module that allows you to split revenue. And this is cool because you can basically give money to people without them even knowing. One example of how this was used, we paid a designer to create an image for us on Lens to kind of like essentially tweet out about the 1-year anniversary of Lens. In addition to that, we set a collect module and sent 100% of the funds to the creator without them even knowing. And we set a collect amount of like 1 or 2 Matic. And I believe they received in the range of like $10,000 the last time I checked from that. And that's really cool because it's a good way to kind of do fundraising and stuff. And it's a permissionless way to do fundraising.
If you guys want to throw my address on there for any of your Lens profile, you can do that without me knowing too, y'all. That's it.
Got it. The next idea beyond extensibility is composability. Again, this is a feature of blockchains, public protocols, and Web3, not just Lens. But in the spirit of composability, you could think of Lens as kind of like a managed infrastructure that you can just build on. So you don't have to build anything from scratch. You don't have to build anything from at all actually on the server. This is all already built for you. All you have to do is build out a front end. Everything else is built for you. All you have to do is kind of just start making API calls. We continue to improve and update the back end for free. So again, you're just using this as a service, and the service is free to use. You only have to worry about building and focusing on your client-side app. This could be a web app, mobile app, desktop app. It could be an Apple Watch app. It could be literally whatever you want it to be. And then beyond that, you're inheriting the user base and the ecosystem of the entire Lens protocol, meaning that you don't have to bootstrap your user base from scratch. You have 100,000 or so, and in the future, millions of built-in users on day one. So that's composability for developers. For users, I think this is pretty cool that you can basically just sign up for a single profile, and every single application that launches from thereafter gives you a new experience in which to express yourself, and all of your followers follow you around to every single application that comes online from then on. So when you sign up for Lenser or sign on to Lenser, and then a new app like LensTube shows up, and then a new app like Orb, and then Butterfly, and then Inso, and then Ulala, all of these different apps start showing up. You have all of your follower graph following you around every single one of these apps. You can express yourself and create in different ways, and you don't have to bootstrap your following again from scratch. So it's super cool.
Yeah, just to chime in, like everybody trying to get followers on Threads, right? Like just as that got dropped, it's like, hey, everybody was using Twitter to say, hey, follow me on Threads, and then trying to rebuild their entire the same followers that are on Twitter follow me on Threads, and like you don't have to do that on Lens. It's already happening right there and then.
Yep, exactly. And to me, it makes sense just to kind of like, you might as well bootstrap your audience here, because let's say you're posting on Twitter mainly, cross post to Lens or vice versa. And that way your content is duplicated across both platforms, just in case your Twitter account gets shut down one day for whatever reason, or you start blowing up on Lens. You now have that audience ready to go, and you're kind of like not starting from scratch, and it's not a lot of extra work. So I'm gonna talk about the technology stack. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, is that still working? Like if I post on Lens, would it cross post on Twitter? Because for a while it was, and then it kind of stopped. Is that live again?
Oh, do we have a service to do that?
Yeah.
I actually manually do it. I think we did have a service that did that at one point, but I kind of like to manually post, because there's different tags on Twitter and versus Lens a little bit. So if I want to like, if I want to at someone, their at is going to be different, I think. So yeah.
Just an idea,
but
guys.
Automating that would be dope, and having like an automated system for that would be dope.
Yeah. Just throwing that out there, guys, just in case. Yeah.
So the tech stack for Lens from the perspective of a developer like you is basically this. You already know about the Lens API, the GraphQL API, and the Lens SDKs. So that's kind of like the base of what you need. And then from there, you need to have one storage network that you start using to store metadata. And this is like just an API call that you'll make before you save a publication on Lens. And this is essentially where your information is stored. And we give developers full control over this. I think in the future, the SDK is actually going to allow the user to not worry about this and do it for them. And we're going to default to bundler network because it's the fastest, the cheapest, and it's on Arweave. But for now, you can choose where you want your metadata to be stored. So you can choose to have the metadata on bundler, and Arweave, or IPFS. And then if you want to implement features beyond kind of the base stuff, let's say you want live streaming or video, live peer is what a lot of people are using. You've probably already used Ethers.js or WAGMI or RainbowKit. All that stuff you can still use for any wallet interactions. And then you would just choose some mobile or web client. So we have a lot of builders using React, Svelte, Next.js, Flutter, all React Native, even some native iOS and Android devs. And that's about it. So what we're going to do now is do a demo. When I say demo, it's actually going to be us building an app from scratch. So this is the workshop. It's at github.com/lensprotocol/ sorry, /Dabit3/Lens Protocol Workshop. I'm going to see if I can post a comment here.
I just posted it on there on the YouTube chat, so I went ahead and posted it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So that's the link. You can use that at any time to follow along with this workshop. So meaning that you don't have to follow along today if you want to just watch and kind of like get a feel for what's going on, or you can follow along now. It's up to you. But if you kind of get lost or something, don't worry. This is open source. It's going to be there forever. It's been around for 2 months, and actually for longer than that maybe. And I keep updating it and improving it and stuff. So another good resource is the Lens docs. So docs.lens.xyz. Here on the left-hand side, we have 4 quick start guides. We have the developer quick start and the authentication quick start, which are really close to what we're gonna be doing today, using the Lens SDK. If you wanna go lower level, you can also use the API quick starts, but I recommend the regular quick starts for new developers. We have a lot of docs that go into a lot of other stuff too, so don't get overwhelmed. Focus on the quick starts to get you started. From then, you can answer any other questions there. And then in the Discord, we have a Lens Discord that you can find on our docs as well. And we have an AI enabled room there that allows you to ask questions about our documentation. So you can say, actually, maybe I can demo that as well. It's been a while since I've been in my Lens Discord, so let's see here. I'm going to say, here we go. So I'm going to say, how to query for a user. You probably can't see that. Well, maybe you can. If I only know their Ethereum address. So this will create a thread, and the AI bot will just go and go through our docs and then find the answer. And then you can basically copy and paste some of this code. And actually, that's not even a good answer. Let me see here. Yeah, I'll have to get them to fix that. But anyway, most of the time, this is actually really, really good. Anyway,
thumbs down it. That's it.
Yeah, I'm gonna thumbs down that one. Yeah, it should be, anyway, it should be a React hook anyway. But anyway, that's actually not a terrible place to go because most of the time it's pretty good. All right, so we're basically starting here. I've already created the Next.js app. So if I go here, I can open this up in my text editor. And what you're gonna see here is that we have an empty Next.js app. So if I go to page.tsx, you'll see that it has all this boilerplate. And if I run npm run dev, we open up localhost 3000 here, you'll see that we have basically an empty Next.js app. We'll open up the console because we'll be using that in just a second.
Is this 13, the latest one?
Yeah, this is Next 13 using app directory,
Yep, okay. All right. So it works. It's compatible. Like you don't have issues running into that with Lens. You don't have to like use an older version or anything.
No, it works perfectly. In fact, you know, I've been using app directory a lot, and it seems to be pretty stable. Like for most of the stuff I've been doing, people complain about it, but I think it's usually like when you start throwing a ton of code at it, like a lot of dependencies and maybe some of that SSR stuff is kind of not working with other libraries, but it works great with Lens. Okay, so we basically just done this. So all we've done was create the app. So what we want to do now is just solve the dependencies. So the dependencies that we're going to need for the Lens SDK to work are Lens Protocol, React Web. There's also a Lens Protocol / React for React Native, but we're only going to be focused on web, so we're installing the React Web. We're going to install this Lens Protocol WAGMI, which is basically like a connector to WAGMI with Lens. And then we're going to install WAGMI and VM. And I don't know how you pronounce VM. Maybe it's Vim. I don't know. But I'm going to say VM. Okay, cool. So those are our dependencies. Yeah, question?
Oh, no. I was agreeing with you. I say VM too.
Okay, cool. I mean, I've only been using VM a couple of like weeks, honestly, or like literally. So kind of late to the, I guess, to the party. So I'm going to go here to my TS config, and because I'm in a workshop, I'm going to say no implicit any, false, because I don't want to kind of declare types for everything in this short amount of time, because we're focused more around just functionality versus like type safety and all that stuff.
Quick
And I'm going
question
to
while
go
you're
here.
cleaning up.
Yes.
So you're using VM, and that's kind of like, I struggle with that myself. I've been like holding on to Ether's 5.7.2 for the longest. Is there an Ether's option on there, or you really have to bite the bullet and just go with the trend now, or go Ether 6?
Okay, so the interesting thing is that you can also install Ethers and use it for custom stuff, but VM isn't even exposed to you as a developer. It's just kind of an implementation detail that we are using that you don't really see at all. If that makes any sense. So you're not actually importing Vim or anything like that. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I've been messing with it a little bit and had some struggles with it, because I was using VM and I used the Ethers for like the transaction.wait, and that's a little bit different on there. So like I would have a loading screen on a certain aspect. I'm not a front end developer, so I'm like, well, I claim not to be, but I end up writing a lot of front end anyway. But I was like, okay, well, how do I do this in VM now that I don't use Ethers? So that was like a major blockage for me. So, oh, use transaction wait, and there is yeah, like Diego, I said, there's an Ethers adapter as well. But I was like, okay, well, how do I flow quickly without having to learn a new stack? It was kind of like my resistance at all times. So just curious if there was like another repo out there, but I'm not
Yeah,
nervous
you don't
now.
have to use VM at all. I mean, you don't have to touch VM. It's just under the hood what we're using here. Okay, so the I think the most complicated part about using the SDK is how large of a configuration setup you have to kind of get this all to work. I am with my Lens libraries. I maintain the React Native Lens UI kit and the widgets libraries, and they have basically zero config. So you just import and use. The trade-off there is that if you want to do more sophisticated stuff, like publish a post or authenticate or store cookies and sessions or authentication tokens on the client, you have to do a lot of stuff yourself. Whereas using the SDK with all these configurations, it's all handled for you. So once you've configured the SDK at kind of like the entry point of your app, which we're about to do, then all the child components just work really, really simply. So this is kind of like a heavy configuration on the initial entry point. But once you've done this, all the child components are just single liners, and it does a lot of stuff for you. So without going into a tons of details, we're having a couple of dependencies on WAGMI. Well, actually, we have 4 dependencies on WAGMI. So this is all like WAGMI specific stuff. We only have 2 imports from Lens, and then the WAGMI bindings are essentially taking this WAGMI stuff and combining it with Lens, and we do that right here when we create what we're calling a Lens configuration. So I wouldn't worry about how this stuff works right now. The main things I would check out maybe would be which networks that we have here. You want to support Polygon, Mumbai, and Polygon for sure with Lens, because you want to have testnet and mainnet. And then you also want to decide whether you're going to work on the production environment or the development environment. So you can import development or production. And production is just mainnet, development is testnet. And then we're using a provider type of pattern here to wrap our main child component. So this is our app, essentially. The children is our app, and we're passing down React context under the hood without us actually having to deal with that using these providers. So you kind of set all this stuff up once. I will admit it's a decent amount of code, but once you have that set up, then we'll be able to start using Lens with only 1 line of code or 2 lines of code. So in layout, that's our configuration. What we want to do now is build our first view. And if we go to like an app like Lenster, you have 2 main types of feeds that you'll probably see. You'll have a feed of publications like this, and then you might go to your profile or someone's profile and you would see like a feed of users or followers or something like that. So that's the typical two types of main feeds that you see in any social app: users, publications. With our app, we're going to start off with the feed of users. So what we want to do is query the profiles using one of the recommendation algorithms. And in our case, we're going to use this use explore profiles, which brings back just a recommended list of users. And we want to map over those profiles and provide like just a profile image and maybe like some information about each profile. So to do that, I guess we'll go ahead and write these lines of, well, actually, I'm going to go ahead and just copy all this and we'll walk through it. Okay, so we're importing the use explore profiles query, and then we're invoking it here, passing in some arguments. So there's different types of arguments that you can pass in. You can pass in sort criteria, which would be like something like, let's see here.
And you're control clicking to get into that, right? Like in VS Code, you're hitting control click.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just TypeScript. So that's the good thing about TypeScript. You can see all of the code that it's relying on. If that's a hack that you haven't used before, definitely recommended. But you can filter based on created on, latest created, most collects, most followers, blah, blah, blah. So let's say we wanted to say, we want to import, we could say profile sort criteria by dot most followers, okay? So this is gonna bring us the top 25 profiles sorted by the most followers. Or you could just leave this blank and it would just be more of a basic query. All right, and then what we're gonna do is we get that data back, and we also have other values here. So we could say error, and then we could say, you know, like if error, return error, something like that, I don't know. But you know, you get the idea. We have other stuff that gets returned. I'm just trying to make this as basic as possible. And this will come back with an array of profiles. We're gonna map over those. So we're gonna say data.map. We're gonna return a link to a new page that we haven't yet created that's gonna let us drill down into these individual profiles. So again, going back to the social, the traditional social type of application, you have a feed, you click on a profile, you see the profile details. That's kind of the idea here. We have a feed, we wanna click on that profile, drill down on that profile details. We're rendering a profile image, we're rendering a profile handle and a profile bio. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open up our app, and what we should see is this feed of profiles coming back. So now we have the top profiles sorted by the number of followers. So Lens has the most followers, makes sense. Oops, I don't know why that 404. Oh yeah, I know why 404. We haven't built that page yet. So like once we build the page, you'll be able to click on one of these and see the details. It might have been cool for us to also show something like profile by that stats, maybe that total followers. So we might be able to say, okay, this person has 112,000 followers, 96,000. So we see that it is indeed like sorted in that way, going down to like 26,000. All right, so what we want to do now is like click on a profile and see the profile details just like we might do here. So to do that, we're going to create a new file and folder for Next.js to support folder-based routing. So we're going to say, or file-based routing, we're going to say profile and a new folder below that called handle with the bracket, and then a new file called page. And this is just the way that you deal with pages in Next 13. All right, and within that, we're gonna create this new component. And I might start off by doing something pretty basic. And I'm gonna like remove this here. This isn't much code to walk through. So we're using a new hook called use profile. Cool thing about Next.js folder-based routing, and I didn't learn this actually until recently, and how this works in 13 is that in the actual argument, you get the parameter for the URI. So when I click on /profile/Linster, this Linster.lens will show up right here. And then you can use that to call the API to get the details for that handle. So we're basically saying we want to use the use profile hook. The argument is the handle. The handle is coming out of the route. And then the return value is the actual profile information. And we get profile loading, and then obviously like error. We're going to say if loading, we're going to show a loading indicator. And then if not, we're going to show a quick profile with the profile image, the handle, and the bio. But we really want to show their publications as well. So we're going to go ahead and refresh. We see the loading indicator. And then we see that we have linter.lens, which is exactly what we want. So if we go back to our main app, we should be able to click around and start seeing profile details. So what we want to do now is render all of the publications. So if I go back to the workshop, I'll see that I have this publications component. And the publications component is going to take a profile as an argument. And we're going to import use publications hook. And then in this profile function, we can then take the profile as the argument here. I believe we'll use some TypeScript there. I think I have to import. Oh, we are imported profile. Okay, cool. Actually, we're going to call that publications. My bad. Okay, so we have the publications component. And instead of like copying and pasting each individual line, let me just go ahead and copy and paste the whole thing and walk through it. All right. So we have publications, taking the profile as the argument or as the prop. We're calling use publications, passing in the publications and the number of publications that we want to limit it to. In this case, we're going to say 20. We're passing in the profile ID. This could have also come in here as a prop. If we wanted to only get the ID, we could have just passed that in, doesn't matter. And we are doing like a small hack here. There's this idea of a mirror. So if you go to my lens profile, actually if you go to any lens profile, you'll see like there's mirrors. And instead of like formatting a mirror and all that, we're just going to show the publication just to make it simple. Anyway, so we're going to map over the user's publications and we're going to show the publication content. And if they have an image, we want to show the image as well. So if I go to lens profile here, we should see stuff like, I don't know, like this show up. We might not see like this video or anything like that because we haven't handled video yet in our example app here. But that's the general idea. So if I save and I go back here, you'll see that we now see the user's publications as well. So we're taking this a step further and actually showing that. So it looks like there's one of the ones I posted. It must have been a mirror from them. So that's pretty cool. The next thing, the last thing we'll do is add the ability to sign in and to follow. So what I would like to do would be, okay, I like this person, this profile, I want to follow them, and I want to click a button so I can follow them. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand on what we have here. And this is going to take a bunch of additional imports. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste, and we're going to walk through. There's a decent amount of setup in order to do identity and authentication. And also we have like separate hooks for following, for logging in with the wallet, logging out with the wallet, and stuff like that. So we can actually move these up here to see that we have about 5 new imports here. So we're going to be importing these imports. We're going to do some setup having to do with the wallet. We're going to have the hook for wallet login, which will give us a function called login that we can invoke. All we have to do once it's set up is just call login, and that will show a login. We'll have a logout function, which is right here. The wallet is the signed in user. So this is like, whatever this is, address. So all this stuff is basically different data that we're getting and functions that we're getting to use. So we're going to say if there is no wallet, we're going to ask the user to sign in with the sign in button. And if there is a wallet, we're going to show a sign out button and a follow component. So if I save that and I go back to our app, then you'll see that we have the sign in button. So if I go ahead and click that, we're going to click sign in. We're now signed in with Lens. And I can then follow this person, but I've already followed them. So I'm going to go back and maybe try to find someone that I haven't followed. And the way that I'm going to do that is maybe like latest creator or something like that. So these are like the people that have created content the latest. So I'm going to click on this person here, and I'm going to go to their profile on Linster. So this is them. So they're brand new to Lens, I guess. They have 0 followers, so I'm about to be their first follower, but I'm going to follow them on my app. And nothing happened because I didn't actually kind of use a callback to log anything, but ideally I might say, congratulations, you follow this person. And then I want to go back here, and if I refresh, this should say unfollow. Boom. So we followed this new user from our app, and as you can see, like we did quite a bit in a short amount of time. Really, really basic in terms of like UX and UI. Like the design isn't that great, but the functionality is there. So let's say you wanted to build a social app like this, wouldn't be very difficult in terms of like actually getting that functionality in a similar state. If you want to learn more about Lens, the 2 places I would go would be beyond the workshop would be docs.lens.xyz. And then I would also just go to lens.xyz. Lens.xyz has the dev docs. It has a link to, let's see here. Oh, down here at the bottom, you can see this Lensverse page. Has grants applications and stuff like that. And then if you go to lens.xyz/apps, you'll see a list of some of the apps that are out there. So some of my favorite ones are Butterfly, Chromadin, Orb, LensTube, Lenster. There's a couple of niche apps that are coming online and stuff. There's like recommendation algorithms and tools and stuff like that you can also check out. So yeah, that's it. So if you have any questions, I can hang out for the next 8 minutes.
Much appreciated. So Nate has a question about benefiting from Mocha as devs for building apps on Lens. Is that something they're concerned about, or is that on the platform level for Lens?
Yeah, this is more about us being able to kind of like scale. So the reason that Lens is a closed beta, 2 reasons. One is that Polygon only, to be quite honest, can handle a few hundred transactions per second at the most. And this is a shared blockchain. This isn't like AWS where you spin up your own database and you throw 1 million operations per second, and you're the only one using that database. Polygon is used by everyone in the world. We're talking about BMW and like Disney and your friend that launched at ETC. Like everyone's using Polygon at the same time. So that 100 transactions per second is actually 10 transactions per second for you, or 5, right? Because if you start like, if a few apps start getting load, it just isn't going to scale. So like, how do you actually build a system that scales at 50,000 transactions per second? Well, there isn't a blockchain that does that. Literally, there is no blockchain that does that. No one can argue that there is. And if they are, then they're snake oil salesmen and they're lying to you. What you have to do is you have to innovate and you have to find ways to kind of get the job done. I think that you're starting to see new data availability layers coming online to enable this type of scale. Celestia, where I work, is working on something that will enable this. Polygon Avail is working on something that is going to enable this. EIP, I forgot, is it 1443 or 4337? I don't know. The proto-date sharding will start enabling this to some extent on some of these rollups. Bundler Network, and to an extent, enables this. Arbitrum Nova is doing this with data availability committees. So like, but you still like have to figure out and work things around. So we basically, when I say we, the royal we, it's really the engineering team who's like much smarter than me, built this system that uses Bundler Network and Arweave as a data availability layer. And therefore we can scale ultimately infinitely, like in the future, but for now, way beyond what we need to be. So now that we can scale, we can start onboarding a lot more users. There's a reason why, I don't know, I think it was Blue Sky had to shut off invites. Blue Sky is pretty well known, and like they've been building by some of the best people in the world, like engineering wise, for a long time. They can't scale decentralization because it's hard, right? So like we have to find ways to do that, and that's kind of what we're doing. And now that we have that available, we just rolled out an invite system today. So check that out. You might have some invites in your inbox. We're going to also roll out a much improved public whitelist and waitlist for everyone in the world. So anyone in the world can start getting a lens handle pretty shortly.
Nice answer. That was in depth. You answered quite a few questions that I had. Two questions on my book on that one is, first, when you follow somebody, you have that NFT in your main wallet. So when you transfer your lens profile to a brand new wallet, what happens to the followers that sit on the original wallet?
So Lens V2 is launching, or is being announced at ETC, solved that problem. But for right now, you lose the people that you're following. You have your followers still, but you would have to go back and refollow some of those people that you wanted to continue following. But that's something that we're fixing along with a bunch of other stuff. And if you're going to be at ETC or watching ETC, Stanley is giving a talk on July 17th about that, bunch of other really cool new features, as well as some other like big announcements that are happening from Lens.
Nice. I won't, unfortunately, not be in France. I'll be here in California, hating on everybody on France. But
California is nice though. I don't mind
mean,
being there.
Well, I guess V2 might be the other question, is like, with the, I forget the EIP, whatever numbers it, but the NFT can actually own all the other NFTs. Like that makes more sense, where it's like just grouped up to that one NFT where your follower count and your, who you're following are all owned by that one lens profile. So I was like, is that a project, or I don't want to say alpha, but like that would be the idea of like, what a good use for lens, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with 6551 and the Lens ecosystem. We're also partnering up with them on some stuff. And what's going to happen in V2 is that we by default within the protocol have this idea of delegation. So it would be like if you sign up for Twitter, and then I'm like, oh, Billy and Amanda can both start managing my Twitter profile, and I'm just gonna go in my settings and enable that. You can enable as many wallets as you want from your profile to manage your profile. So what that means is that you take your profile, you put it in a cold storage, and then you set your hot wallet to post. And then your wallet gets compromised. Oh, okay, doesn't matter. I still have this profile. Just disable that address and enable a different address.
Yeah, there's another question, but yeah, it just reminded me. Like, I know a couple of people that just got hacked, unfortunately, and it was because of the Guardian system that the lens profile wasn't moved, because it has that 7-day cooldown period. It took me a while. I had to do like Tenderly to find out what was happening, but that is such a cool feature. Yeah,
that was interesting. That is already starting to kind of come to light as saving a handful of people already. It's only been available for a few days. What he's mentioning is this new feature that we implemented that doesn't allow you to move your profile for a certain number of days by default. You can disable this, like if you want to just disable it, but it would take 7 days for it to be disabled. And then from then on, you could do whatever you wanted with it. But now, like if you have a lens profile and your wallet gets hacked, or if you sign and allow all transactions or something like that, that gives someone else control of your wallet, they can drain your money, they can drain your NFTs, but they can't take your lens profile. And all you have to do is just go disable that. Now, if you've leaked your private key, that's another story. You have to kind of erase at that point. You might just like have to stay like online until that Guardian period is kind of expired, and then try to save it. But for the most part, most of the phishing attacks that we're seeing, or that approved for all or whatever that is, and then that can be revoked, so people are still able to keep their profiles.
One last question. I mean, this is a standing question. I don't know if you know, will V2 come out that day in the announcement? Is that pretty cool?
It's more of an announcement that I can't go into detail there, but if you want to learn more, I would just say keep an eye on the Twitter for us that day. You'll learn more about it. And V2 will it still be exclusive to grab a lens handle. We are going to open up a very easy to access public waitlist and whitelist that it'll just be lens.xyz, click claim a profile, you'll go into like this waitlist, and then you'll get notified when your profile is ready. So it will be publicly available to everyone at that point. It will not be permissionless because we still have a massive demand for like lens profiles as NFTs on OpenSea. So people are trying to airdrop farm and like sell and all this malicious behavior that I would call it. So until we figure that out, we're just onboarding real quality people only. We don't want airdrop farmers. We don't want people that do nothing but like retweet airdrops and like NFT like giveaways, all that crap. Like, don't want any of those people on there, to be quite honest. So if that's you, just like don't even try to get on.
Every other day I get an offer like USDC or ETH for like my lens profile on OpenSea. I get an email, hey, someone's trying to buy it for like $100. It's pretty wild how crazy these guys are. But yeah, it's just Web3. And I think that's it for the questions. We're just going to wrap it up. We're right at the hour. Thank you so much, Nader, for taking the time. I know you are a busy person everywhere, literally coming from a flight in Mexico City, like just dropping down a laptop and dropping some knowledge. Like, it's pretty easy. It's come a long way since I looked at Lens of how to get used to it, like with WAGMI hooks, libraries. It's like, again, I struggle with front end because it's not really my forte, but like that looks easy enough for me to use. If you feel like you've been comfortable with WAGMI and Rainbow Kit, I think you can jump on Lens really easily. And I think, if we have this hackathon coming up that has some API calls from Lens, I think the starter kit will get you started to just start using that information right off the top. So thank you so much, Nader. I don't know if there's any other final words, but I think everybody's been pretty happy with what they learned so far.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
That's it, guys. Thank you so much. And tomorrow we have another workshop. We have it with 0x Thresh, how to use Docker for Web3. We're going to get really deep into, using Docker, maybe running your own node or running your own like Oracle system. So that'll be a good fire one. That's going to be at the usual time of our workshops, which is right after DD Fridays. So I'll see you there tomorrow. All right. Thank you, guys. And I'm ending broadcast.